Hello, and welcome to another online Decode video lesson. Today we're going to start learning about making something real from scratch. And to do that, we're going to make something that's kind of like a website, but kind of not. We're going to use web technologies to make something. So it's the same stuff that powers websites, but it's doing something more interesting than just displaying information, because that is kind of boring and can be kind of boring to start off with. So what we're going to do is we're going to recreate the popular game 2048. Now, if you haven't seen that game before, I'm going to take a look at it right now. So in my trusty browser, I'm going to visit git.io/2048. And when it loads, I get this little game here. It's really simple. Basically, you press the arrow keys and all the tiles move in that direction. Every time a tile moves, a new one comes up. If two tiles combine that are the same number, they add together. And it's as simple as that. And it gets really addictive. I encourage you to have a play around with the game if you haven't before. The goal is, of course, to get to 2048, hence the name. And you'll find that things quickly get out of control if you don't have any strategies in play. Anyway, so we're going to try and recreate this. And it won't actually be that difficult. The great thing about this is that one of the hardest parts of making something is actually designing it. Because if you try and make something without a really good idea of what you're making, then you're going to end up having a real hard time doing it, because you're going to have to make decisions on the fly, and you'll end up spending more time thinking about things than actually making it. And as a result, you'll do a bad job of it. Okay, so this is the game that we're going to try and recreate. And we're going to make this from scratch using web technologies. So what we need to do is download some software to actually make this with. Because, we can do it all in the browser on a website and then write some code in there, but then you don't really have an end result. That's all stored inside a website. That's not something that you can, for example, send to somebody. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually make the files and store them on our computer, like a real programmer does. So I'm going to download this software called Brackets, which is effectively a text editor. So I'm going to go to brackets.io. Now, if you have any other personal preference, you've used this sort of stuff before, then feel free to go with that software. But this is something that I recommend and I really enjoy using. You can use it on Windows or Mac OS like I am, or Linux. It's completely cross-platform. So I can hit this download button and download the file and then open it up. But I've already downloaded it, so I encourage you to download the application. It's completely standalone. It's really simple installation. So I'm just going to close that now. And when you open up Brackets for the first time, you'll be presented with something that looks like this. So this is a bit of an example application, which is all written in the programming, the languages that we're going to explore. This might look like complete nonsense to you at the moment, and I'm not surprised if it does. So to try it out, this is an application that we haven't even written. We can hit this lightning bolt here, and it'll explain a little bit about how this works. It says that it only works with Google Chrome, so if you want to use this feature, which I'm going to be making an example of, you'll need to have Google Chrome installed at the same time, which is also another really easy thing to install. So we'll open that up in a different Google Chrome, and hey presto, it makes this thing. And it explains a little bit how to use it and all that stuff, but we don't need to worry about that. So what I'm going to do is create a new project. Start from scratch. We're making a new thing. We need to get out of this. So how do you make a new project? It's effectively a new folder. So I'm going to click on this getting started thing up here. I'm going to click open folder, and then I've got an explanation, a place where I can choose where I put it. Now beforehand, I made this, in my home folder, I made this folder called Code, which is where I'm going to store all my coding stuff. And I suggest you would do the same. This can be anywhere. It just makes it easier to categorize everything. What you don't want to do is just dump all of your stuff on your desktop or just your My Documents folder, because it's going to end up being complicated. So you can go whatever folder you want, create a new one, and I'm going to call it 2048, because that's effectively what we're making. I'm going to click create, and then now we're inside it, as you can see here, and I'm going to click open. Clean slate. Nothing at all. Well, that's a bit daunting. Where do we start? Well, we're going to start by making something small and then increasing it over time, because that's how you make an application. You tackle everything tiny little feature by tiny little feature. And we're going to focus on implementation and practicalities. If you want to get more of the theory behind all these elements, every time I sort of introduce a new concept that's relating to programming, I can link you to one of our lessons that explains that particular theory, as opposed to explaining how you implement that theory, just so you don't get bogged down with too much information that you don't want. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we're going to make here. The first language that we need to get our heads over is this thing called HTML, which is the language of the web. Now, I explained before that programming is instructions, and technically writing this language isn't programming, but it is still kind of instructions. You write in a language and you convey some information to the computer, and it presents that information in some way. And here is the syntax of what HTML will look like. So effectively, you've got tags and content inside those tags. So you have a tag name, which is surrounded by those little lesser than or equal signs, lesser than or greater than signs, or people prefer to call them angled brackets sometimes, which is good. And they surround the tag name. And that is the opening of a tag. Now inside that, you have content. That can be more tags, that can just be words, that can be all sorts of stuff. And then you close your opening tag with the same tag name, but a slash before its name to indicate that it's closing. Now, this formatting is important. It's important that you use the right angle brackets, put them in the right place, close everything properly, and use the right kind of slash. It is all very important. Now, there are some other aspects, such as a self-closing tag, which is a tag which has another tag name at the beginning, and it has that slash at the very end of the tag as well, so that nothing can be put inside this. Now, only particular ones can act in that fashion. And self-closing, all kinds of tags can also have these things called attributes, which help add some extra data to it. So, for example, let's say we had an image and we wanted to say how wide it was. We could say the width is the attribute is equal to a certain value, which is surrounded in quotes and an equal sign. So it's really simple. You just say this value, this attribute is equal to this value, and you separate them in spaces, go attribute equals value signs in quotes, and that's all there is to it. All right, so that's basically all that the HTML language is. And with that, you can do some pretty incredible stuff. Now we're going to start simple, as I said before. So inside this 2048 folder, I'm going to right click on the left side here and click new file. And I'm going to call it index.html. As simple as that. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to fill this with some content. Now, ignore this folder that I've just made here. This is just to help me record the coding for our Decode website. And if you want to sort of see the code interactively, be able to copy and paste it really easily, head over to the Decode website. There'll be a link somewhere if you're not viewing it on there already. So what you always want to start an HTML document with is something called a doc type. Now this breaks all the rules that I've just explained to you already, because you use an opening angle bracket, then an exclamation mark, then the word doc type, and then HTML. Now, this is the only exception that you're going to see. All this is that it's a little bit of explanation of what this document is. It tells the browser that what it's seeing is an HTML document. Even though it has it in the file name, it needs some sort of affirmation inside the file itself. Let's get to some real stuff. Let's write an actual tag. So I'm going to write a tag called HTML, surrounded in those brackets, and you'll see brackets, the software, automatically makes the closing one for me, which makes life a bit easier. So this HTML tag is the top level tag of any document. Everything needs to be inside it. Next thing I'm going to make is what I want to do inside this HTML tag when I'm doing content inside it is I want to press tab to indent it. Now that just helps me see information easier. So I know that anything inside it is indented, so it's way easier to read than keeping it all sort of tucked inside it. That's just something to note down. I'm going to make a head tag. This head tag here is not going to be used at the moment, but I'll get back to it in a future lesson. It's just important that we have it here for later. But this next tag that I'm going to make is the body tag. Now that's where all of our content actually lives inside. So we've spent this entire time making a whole bunch of tags that don't actually do anything. It's great, isn't it? Sometimes things like that with writing applications can seem frustrating. There's a lot of what's called boilerplate, in which you're doing a whole lot for nothing. So if I click this lightning bolt now, we'll get a whole lot of nothing. So I'm going to put this window over here for now, just so we can keep reference to it. And I'll put this over here. Because live preview in brackets is this cool thing. As I change the document, it's going to be updated in real time. Now, something to remember is to always save while you're writing things. So I'm always hitting Command S or Control S if you're on Windows, just to make sure that things are getting saved as I go. So I'm going to make an actual tag that displays some content. I'm going to make what's called an H1. I'm going to write Decode 2048. Hit save, and you'll see it's updated in this right-sided window. Now H1 simply means heading 1. And what a heading is that it's a way of categorizing content. And typically, H1 is the first heading, the top level one, the one that is the most important. Now that number can go all the way down to 6. You can have H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. And they're all for categorizing content. That's all it is. But beneath that, I'm going to put a P tag. And that P tag stands for paragraph. So anything that's sort of a paragraph content, you'd put in one of these tags. And if we go back to the actual 2048 game, you'll see there's a bit of a score here. So I'm just going to write down score 0. Whew. High quality stuff, isn't it? We've written some code, and we've got this document here that is a heading and a score. And I've had to spend roughly 12 minutes explaining how this works. It's slow beginnings. It does take some time to get to where you want to be. But this is a start, and next time we can actually get to putting some real content in there and giving it a few looks, and then eventually getting to the interactive aspect, the game aspect. So that's all that's all I have to say for today. Hopefully you've learned something. Try experimenting around with some different tags, do some research online about what they all mean, and I'll see you next time with the extra stuff, interactivity, and making it look prettier than it does now. Thank you, everybody.